Denny was one of my mentors in New Ulm. Again, I was the manager at KNUJ for over a 4-decade period, starting in 1986 and all the way up till 2020, the COVID year at the end of 2020. Denny always took time to make sure I was in the loop on things, which I appreciated. One of the things, shortly after I became the manager at the station, Denny asked if I would join Rotary. He said it's been a tradition in New Ulm that the manager of the station is in Rotary. And I know that George Correntian had been and Perry Galvin had been, and quite frankly, while I'm not the general manager anymore, I am still a member of Rotary in New Ulm. And that was because Denny invited me there, and it was a really good opportunity for me. Some things about Denny. One that I remember is Denny showed me a piece of history about New Ulm. He said, I can take you to where the city of New Ulm, where they laid out the city, how many rods this way and how many rods that way. And there's a tree, I believe it's just off German Street, maybe around 3rd South. And if you find this area, there's a sidewalk that goes around, it loops around a big tree. That is the tree that from that point, New Ulm was laid out north, south, east, and west. Well, anyway, he took the time to show me that. I found that interesting and still do. And I've shared that with many other people myself.
Hi, I'm Sarah Warmka. I'm the president and CEO of the New Ulm Area Chamber of Commerce. And I moved to town in 2014 and started working at the chamber in the tourism role there. And Denny was a regular. He came to the chamber all the time. And I don't remember the very first time I met him, but I know that he was always overwhelmingly welcoming, right? Just definitely went out of his way to make sure that I knew that he was glad that our family moved to town. And I just, that's really, really something special. I think Denny really had this way of connecting people and making them feel special, and like our community also, like we're all here to make our community a better place. Obviously he was a civic leader for his life, right? And even when he retired professionally, he was still so involved in the community, still serving on boards and going out of his way to help our community improve. He would do research all the time, right? And look at old newspaper articles, and he must have had files at his house. I'm not sure how he kept so organized, but he would stop in all the time with just an article from the paper in 1973 that talked about, some downtown project or something else that's happening in another community that has to do with German heritage, or something that he thinks our community could replicate or we could learn from. So I have a file actually in my office of a Denny Warta file where I'd put different articles and things in there that he brought through.
Hello, my name is Les Schultz, and I was a former city councilor for 16 years and got to know Denny Warta actually quite a bit even before that. I would call Denny a patriarch not only of his family that he loved dearly, but also patriarch of our community. Denny was involved in so many different projects to help benefit this city. Business owner, Denny himself was in politics. He was also a city councilor. He was also a county commissioner. And I would search Denny out for advice on some topical issues and get his opinion. But Denny, during his time, also had projects that he would run past me and would come into my office, or he would look me up, or we'd have a beer and talk about what was going on and flush out the idea a little bit and who we should talk to. But just such a great historian.
It was fun to connect with Denny. I've known him my whole life, but really got to know him in the last 25 years. Years ago, I was always visiting my grandparents and stuff, his cousin, and then, we really spent a lot more time in the last 25 years and really connected on that level. For the German Bohemian Heritage Society, Denny was our king. He's been the reigning king, also known as Denny VIII, since 2002. And it's a long-standing tradition here in New Ulm to have like a Bohemian king, German Bohemian king. It was going back to 1875 when Peter Gog, an immigrant from the same area where Denny's ancestors are from, was the first king, and kind of along down the lines. In 1985, that was reinstituted with the German Bohemian Heritage Society, and that was started in 1984. Denny was pretty instrumental in getting information and people together, learning more about that heritage and culture. And the people that he connected with really helped people here in New Ulm learn more about it, and then ultimately helped with the founding of our organization.
I was the executive director of the Brown County Historical Society, and the leadership in New Ulm made a commitment to help raise funds to move us from this building, the library building, over to the new museum, which is the old post office. That city leadership included Mayor Red Wojciechowski, Dennis Warta, Jim Seifert, and many others. They took it upon themselves to contact businesses to raise money for the museum. So that was my first introduction to Dennis in a very formal way.
Denny was a city councilor, and I was one of the new officers. And we would serve, at that time, we called it serving council agendas, council packets, but we would essentially deliver council packets to the councilor's house, and it was kind of a nice opportunity. We got to talk with individuals, our counselors, got to kind of have that dialogue back and forth. And that was the first time I met Denny, when I would deliver those council agendas. And one thing that I really was my takeaway, I've met several counselors over the years. I've been in law enforcement for 30 years. But one thing that was really a takeaway was he was really interested in getting to know you. And I can remember when I delivered those papers, and he'd ask a little bit about myself. He'd ask about my family, and I thought that was really nice, that investment that he was making, with the officers, and that was really my takeaway. But then as I got to know him better, and would continue to have contacts with him in our small town in New Ulm, he would retain it, and he would also ask about, it's like, okay, now your son must be 2 years old or 3 years old, and your wife Carrie, is she still doing daycare, and so on and so forth. And I really thought that was extremely impressive, and I'm confident, very sincere.
But one thing I really admired about Denny is he always loved to welcome new people. If he was at the B&L or wherever he might be, the country club, and somebody was new to town, boy, he took them under his wing and he got to know them, and was just a welcoming individual for our community. Some words to describe Denny. I jotted down a few. A friend, a confidant, a historian, but mostly a legend in our community, that people really respected him and liked him, and he gave so much to this city that he loved. But most importantly, he really loved his family. And I traveled with a group that also met up with Denny many years ago to Germany. So I can say that I had a beer with Denny in Germany. I think it was in Detmold, I believe.
Well, Denny was a ladies' man. He enjoyed the company of women. More important, he admired and respected and supported accomplished women. I was a person who benefited from Denny's support. I would never have run for city council if he hadn't encouraged me to do so. It brought Denny into my life in a way that he hadn't been before, and I was very lucky to know him. He was really quite a guy, and he was a ladies' man.
So as I said, Denny loved New Ulm and was a big promoter wherever he went. In 2019, he was almost 92, and we made another trip to Germany together, and we were going over for a Warta family reunion. Different branches of the family of the Wartas that immigrated here to New Ulm stayed in Germany, and so we were getting together with one branch of them. And then right before Denny and Diane flew over, it turned out that one of Georg Warta's sons had passed away earlier in the year, and then his daughter-in-law passed away as well. So it was really kind of strange to pick up Denny and his daughter Diane at the airport and go straight to a funeral. And so it was kind of interesting to learn a little bit more about the culture of funerals and things like that in Germany together. But then just really having the rest of the day to visit with family and friends that Denny's known, some of these people most of their lives since they were little kids. And so it was really kind of meaningful to just see this continue, these relationships. And he was always just very curious of things and always looking things up. I know there's a lot of people who made it to his email list and you almost got too much information as far as things he'd read and sent, and you should do this. And I was trying to think about what to say for this weekend, and I was looking through some stuff and found some magazines and things that Denny had notes on there. This is for Wade, and he'd put Post-its everywhere in the magazine of things he wanted me to make sure I paid attention to. So I'll miss that about Denny. He's been a great mentor to me and learning a lot more about the things we shared a love for, history, culture, and homeland places, whether that's in Europe or here in New Ulm.
And for those of you who don't know Dennis, I refer him as Mr. Idea Man. Dennis always had ideas about, and they were pretty grandiose at first, but then when you started breaking them down and figuring out if we could apply them to our situation as an opportunity for the fair, perhaps we should do that. And so I spent many, I would say hours, visiting with Dennis and found out how creative he was. And what was curious to me is, where did all these ideas come from? It was, and still a mystery to me. And so that, again, was an opportunity to work with Dennis. And over time, I remember doing the heritage tree, not with him, because obviously it was his idea, but I was one of the persons that was supporting that idea through the granting process and the funding process, and very proud to have been a part of that, along with some other community individuals, to help Dennis realize that dream and many, many other dreams.
Denny obviously was very passionate about the Herman Monument and its significance, the significance of what that monument means, not just to us here in New Ulm or to Minnesota, but globally, the importance internationally of what the Herman Monument stood for and all those connections. And so I think that was really, he was a driving force behind really making sure that that monument stays preserved and that we recognize the importance of it. History was certainly really important to him. That was not a good way to end that one, but that's okay. Let's see. I don't know. Can I wrap it up kind of soonish, or do you want me to say anything else?
No, now's a good point. You're in a good spot to wrap it up.
Yeah.
To tie up any loose ends you want to.
All right. Our New Ulm community is lucky that Denny chose to live here, and because of all of his hard work throughout his life, our community is better because of it.
Excellent. That's an excellent end.
Okay.
So he was always very interested in promoting New Ulm, trying to come up with new ideas. You'd come down to see him, and he'd always have some concept or drawing or maybe a cardboard thing of some monument or things like that. So he really tried to, promote New Ulm wherever he was. And then also the history with Civil War and that kind of stuff. In 2012, the regiment here from New Ulm was down for a reenactment in Shiloh, right on the border. The Battle of Shiloh was fought in April of 1862 near the border of Tennessee and Mississippi. So he wanted to be a part of that and see what's going on. So we made a road trip down there to check it out, and it was quite a fun experience. Of course, we stopped and met people he knew all across the country, from Herman, Missouri, and another Herman. He was very supportive of that. So he just found a way to make connections all around the world and everywhere we went.
Once I was kind of at the point where I was working different projects and programs, I would always reach out to Denny Warta. and try to work on something collaboratively, because he was always willing to help, and he just really had the subject matter expertise and just like really a lot of common sense and discretion. He was very easy to work with. So if I ever, a lot of times, I'm looking for someone. Once I was the commander with the American Legion, one point, we had the opportunity of providing the Memorial Day service, Veterans Day service. Denny was always kind of a go-to as far as being one of my guest speakers, because again, he was just very skilled, and he really spoke from the heart.
When my wife and I went to Germany, I'm trying to think, this was in 2015, might have been that year. Anyway, Denny took the time. He said, "You're going over there." He said, "I need to get you connected with some people," because Denny had been to Germany many times and over in the Ulm area. And he had contacts both in Ulm, including Hans Joos. Hans Joos, who is the Sister Cities Commission exchange program, is named after Hans Joos. He got a hold of Hans, made sure that I could meet him in Germany, over in Ulm and Neu-Ulm. And I did, and Hans then went ahead and lined up a reception. I don't even know if I was on the Sister Cities Commission anymore. I might have been off by that time. They did a reception for my wife and I, cheese and wine and the whole deal. It's because of Denny Warta, and that's how that happened. He also set up contacts for us in Detmold. Okay, Detmold is where the big Hermann the German, the statue in Germany is. We have our Hermann the German here, Hermann the Cheruskin. And Denny lined up a lady who was a curator at the Detmold area, and also at Kalkaris. Kalkaris is the area that was later proved to be where the battle of Hermann against the Romans was. And Hermann and his tribes against the Romans, and where they slayed a lot of Romans and so forth. And so we got to go to Kalkaris, to the, call it a state park there. And I got to do a video interview that I brought back for the radio station, and shared some of the history right over there from the Kalkaris battlefield area. Denny lined that up. Again, I was forever grateful. Denny worked on a lot of historical projects in Neu-Ulm. And I don't know all of them, but if you go down by German Park and you're going to see a big plaque for Einstein, Denny was behind that. Einstein came from Ulm, Germany, and the history there. There are other plaques around the city of Neu-Ulm, and I can't remember the names of all these people. Denny was a guy that worked on getting a lot of those things put in place so that forever the memory of these people would be out in front of people. And I thought that was pretty cool, and that's one of the things that he did. Finally, I wanted to mention
What we all know and love about Dennis Warta was his love of community, his love and commitment to the city of Neu-Ulm. He had so many relationships across the ocean with Germany, and was always willing to share that information and to make you aware that there's an opportunity to deepen that connection. So as the mayor, Dennis came to me with many different ideas and suggestions about how I might reach across the ocean to our friends in Germany and Ulm and Neu-Ulm to solidify and deepen that relationship. And so with his encouragement, I would write letters to colleagues of his that might be celebrating a birthday or some other significant event, just to let them know that Neu-Ulm, Minnesota was still alive and well.
In the 70s, Denny started meeting other family members and stuff in Germany, and Warta family, and one was a Georg Warta and all of his kids and their families. And Georg was really instrumental in writing a lot of letters to Denny and describing heritage, history. And then Denny would go over to Germany and went with Georg and his family to Heimattreffens. And those were homeland meetings. Heimat means homeland, where people with German Bohemian ancestry or heritage were, I should back up, they were kicked out of Czechoslovakia after World War II. So They couldn't cross the border during communist times and the Iron Curtain, so they had these homeland meetings near the border, and that's where Denny got to know a lot more people. And then during that time, he met a guy named Rudy Kiefner, and he was part of this Egerland Trachtengruppe, singers and dancers in the Egerland kind of heritage homeland. From many people in New Ulm have this heritage, where there was a lot of chain migration, people immigrating from that area to New Ulm, and so that's a real strong heritage here. Right away, Denny is always promoting New Ulm, and he invited the group to come and sing at Heritage Fest at the time. It took a few years to line up things and funding to do that, but they did come, and they came a few times, and Rudy got to know other people that he was related to here in New Ulm, and then the idea of a German Bohemian monument came up, and Rudy got real excited about that. And he helped with finding an artist to create a sculpture, and was behind the sculpture that we have today, erected in 1991 down by German Park. And based off of Denny's connections and people and bringing people together and promoting these ideas, he was a big part of making that happen here in New Ulm.
But if you would see Dennis that Tuesday night at the country club, he had a story for you. If you saw him at a Rotary meeting, he had a story for you. Or at the annual meeting of this organization or that organization. And that's the other piece of Dennis. He was at everything. I don't know if he cloned himself so that he could be there. And I'm also wondering what he took to be that energizer bunny that he was. He was full of energy up until, I would say, the very end. He always was at, I would say, everything. And even when his health was undermined, and I went to visit him at Oak Hills on a couple of occasions, he wasn't able to communicate as he used to, but he still had that twinkle in his eye. And he would share just a tidbit of a story with you about his experiences in New Ulm or the connection with Germany. So till the very end, as I know, and my experiences with Dennis and my journey with him, he was deeply in love with New Ulm, bold in promoting New Ulm, always cordial, willing to share a story, and full of ideas.
Denny would send me a Christmas card and or letter every year. And I have carried about 4 of them with me in my briefcase because they're pretty cool and they're neat things. One is on attitude that I think is a good reminder. And he would find these little sayings, maybe a poem or maybe just a short written thing about a subject. And he'd share that with people. I know it wasn't just me. I've got one I'm going to read. Again, and it says, "Best wishes, Denny Warta." But this one is really neat. And I know I used it on the radio station a few years also. And it says, "All I really need to know I learned in kindergarten." Maybe you've heard of this, but this I got from Denny. "Most of what I really need to know about how to live and what to do and how to be, I learned in kindergarten. These are the things I learned. Share everything. Play fair. Don't hit people. Put things back where you found them. Clean up your mess. Don't take things that aren't yours. Say you're sorry when you hurt somebody. Wash your hands before you eat. Flush. Warm cookies and cold milk are good for you. Live a balanced life, learn some, and think some, and draw and paint, and dance some, and play and work every day some. Take a nap every afternoon. When you go out into the world, watch out for traffic. Hold hands and stick together. And be aware of wonder." The guy who wrote this, his name is Robert Fulghum, Fulghum, but shared to me by Denny Warta. And I was forever grateful.
He was really a mentor to me, and we had some great conversations, a lot of fun together. And I know he just really loved his community and his family and all of that. And he just really wanted to make a difference in the world.
So thank you, Denny. Thank you for everything you did for our community. We'll miss you.